This happened about 15 years ago. So my buddies and I went fish camping at a pretty remote lake off of a 4x4 trail about 2 hours from home. There were 4 of us, all men, with me being the smallest at 195 pounds, important later. The camping spot has great fishing as it has a nice deep spot with lots of trout right next to it, but the campground itself is rough. It is on the side of a steep hill with barely enough room for tents and a small fire ring. It is accessible by a rough, steep, winding 100-yard trail from where you park your 4x4 above the camp. We had a great day drinking beers and catching our limits on nice-sized trout. After it got dark, we made a small fire and just bullshitted the night away. It was a great time. Suddenly, there was someone shining a blinding light in our eyes from about 10 to 20 yards away. We didn't hear this person approach at all. This person announced themselves as the sheriff. One of my friends asked, "Are you sheriff?" The stranger didn't respond to the question. Instead, he shined a light in each of our faces, then said, "Have a good night," then walked off. We sat there dumbfounded, asking each other what the hell was that. After a minute or two, curiosity eventually got the better of me, so I lit up this person with my stupidly powerful flashlight. He was about 50 to 60 yards away at this point, right before a crest and bend of the trail. Right before he was out of sight. We all saw it. It was just some dude in a flannel shirt and jeans. I said, "That is not a fucking sheriff." He must have heard me, as you could see him start moving quickly for a second before he was out of sight. A few moments later, we heard an engine start, and that was that. Strange we didn't hear the vehicle earlier, but I attribute that to being drunk and loud. Now what makes this kind of scary is, what if it wasn't 4 big dudes he approached? What if it was a single person, or a couple? What would he intend to do? Should we have chased after this person? Debatable. Should we have reported this to the actual sheriff's department? Absolutely, but sadly we never did. Just real quick, if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to leave a subscribe, turn the post notifications on, check the description how you can send me stories. Anyways, here's story number 2. Many moons ago, I went camping with 4 friends, family, on some state game lands here in the northeast US, and had a notably terrifying experience. It was October, so getting kinda chilly, especially at night. We had been to this area before, which featured a sizable creek running through the middle of the forest, as well as the several streams, waterfalls, other such tributaries that just made for this pleasant hiking. However, this time around, we didn't hike very far. Instead, we opted to drive deep into the woods on the dirt roads, before finally arriving at a bridge that looked like it might collapse under the weight of a vehicle, where we parked our car, just before said bridge. At this point, the sun was already starting to go down, which is the main reason we didn't hike, so we decided to just cross the creek via the bridge, on foot of course, and walk along the trail until we found a decent campsite. We found one pretty quickly, and it was really ideal. We could actually still see our car from across the creek, but it was pretty far removed from the trail, kinda hidden in a little nook. We set up our tents, got the fire ripping, and even found a neat little gully in the creek that held our beers and kept them nice and cool, given this was autumn and all. Flash forward, and the first chunk of the evening was one of the best I can remember. A lot of laughing, a lot of music via my brother's hand crank radio, dancing, and just general goofing off. Suddenly, probably around 1 a.m., amidst a slightly drunken haze of merriment, we see a light in the woods approaching. It looks like a vehicle. Thankfully, I was with the group that I was, because we sort of all reactively put out the fire, grabbed our axes, hatchets, knives, and one Glock 33 my friend had, and we quietly hid, trying to see what the hell was approaching us. As the light got brighter, we saw more lights. This was 2 vehicles, trucks. It had people that were yelling, hooting and hollering. It sounded like there were a lot of them. They drove down the dirt road until they saw our vehicle and abruptly stopped. They got out and continued to yell. We could barely see them, barely hear them, but we heard the doors shut. Then, after a few minutes, they turned on a giant spotlight, like the kind you see people use for hunting at night. They started shining it all around, mostly in the general direction of where our fire had been, seemingly looking for where we went in the woods. They yelled more and more, and then someone took out a bullhorn and started telling us to come out, and we know you're out there, and we're going to find you. We also saw around this point, from the shadows of the light, that there were probably about 12 of them. Most seemingly were riding in the back of these 2 trucks. Of course, it wasn't long before they found our sight, but thankfully not us. Again, we had kind of instinctually hid. It seemed to make them upset when they just saw an empty sight, as the yelling, cursing increased, and the bullhorn guys yelling became unintelligible. And then they started breaking glass, bottles I think, before finally one of them took out a gun and fired it in the air. Not long after, there were multiple guns firing off. I can't be sure the size, but some of them sounded really large, and I saw one pretty clearly that looked a lot like my friend's M4. Again, I'm not an expert, I'm just going by my limited knowledge. They kept cursing and yelling, firing into the air over and over with the bullhorn dude just going on and on and on for what seemed like about an hour straight. They were kind of going in waves after a bit. It looked like they were all drinking and essentially partying themselves, and at one point, they started playing really loud, shitty country music, which hilariously seemed to calm them down. Finally, after what felt like forever, they packed up and left while Bullhorn Guy yelled, "We'll be back, we're gonna get you." But they never came back, and they never crossed the bridge either, which I found interesting. However, I didn't sleep. Basically, no one did. We tried to have rotations of keeping watch, but literally no one could relax. We didn't drink anymore either. It just kind of ruined the night. And it unfortunately ruined a favorite hiking camping spot too, because I never wanted to go back there after that. My friend and I, both males in our early 20s at the time, were a couple miles up a Alpines Lake Trail. It was just getting dark. We had put a bottle and a few small sticks as a marker on the side of the trail to help find a particular area late at night, which is totally legal as long as you remove it within a certain amount of time. Long story short, we were coming back up later. We started down and almost instantly heard some guy screaming and yelling extremely angrily. Then we heard, "Yah, yah," and a horse running up on us very fast. I grabbed my dog by the collar, and a guy comes running up on us with his horse. If I hadn't jumped out of the way with my dog, he'd probably run us over. He started screaming at us, "Are you the sons of bitches who marked the trail?" I said, "Yeah, we did. Sorry, man." He pulled back his jacket, put his hand on his pistol, and said, "I ought to mark you." We kept apologizing, but he just kept screaming. Finally, I decided we weren't getting anywhere trying to reason with him, so I'd just go back up to the trail and remove the sticks and pick up the bottle. The guy was still screaming at my friend. I remember hearing, "You like the taste of buckshot, boy?" As I walked back up the trail, I passed another guy coming down on his horse. I was hoping he might be more rational and maybe even apologetic about his friend's anger problem. I said, "How's it going?" to him. He got a huge menacing grin, put his hand on a lever action he had in his scabbard, and said, "How you doing?" really loudly. When I passed the last guy, he shouted, "Who we hanging tonight, boys?" I grabbed the bottle, kicked the sticks off the trail, and waited. I considered running off into the woods, but didn't want to abandon my friend. Finally, my friend came walking up the trail. He was white as a ghost, but the side of his face was red. He was completely freaked out. He said the first guy pulled his pistol out, pointed it at him, and said he was going to kill him. He also backhanded him in the face. He was so scared, he started puking. Anyway, we had to walk out of there in the dark, knowing they could be waiting around any corner. Of course, my dog kept barking at things in the dark, probably chipmunks, to set us on edge even more. We talked to a ranger, and she instantly knew who they were. She said she had trouble with them all the time and that they threatened to kill the rangers all the time. I don't know why they haven't been locked up yet.